Welcome to the Trek Wars podcast, the one podcast that dares to answer the most important question in fandom, which is better, Star Wars or Star Trek, by going through both franchises in chronological release order. I am Kenny Madison, one of your hosts, the Star Trek contingent, and with me, as per always, is...
Me, Aspen Webster, Star Wars contingent. Super chill.
Super chill?
Super chill.
You're super chill?
I would
that
say
kind
famously.
Of language, that kind of language, making you sound like a real Herbert, Aspen.
Oh, no.
Herbert.
I hear you. No, I connect with you. What do they say? Time for me to launch into a musical number.
Aspen?
I pass through the stars like a dove. Just made that up.
Aspen, you truly are my Nara this week as I reach across the aisle and go, yay, brother, as we review both The Way to Eden from Star Trek The Original Series, Season 3, versus Star Wars The Clone Wars, Season 1, Innocents over Ryloth.
Yeah, dude.
Innocents over Ryloth? Innocents of Ryloth.
Innocents
of Ryloth.
Of Ryloth. Because before it was a storm over Ryloth.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, man.
Me acting like I haven't done the research.
We all know who the research guy is, and it's not this guy.
Oh, pish posh, Aspen. I do the textual research, and you do the contextual. Well, I also do some contextual research too, but also your life experience and the things that you care about are so much more vast than my natural inclinations bring, and you just bring in different perspectives, and I really enjoy that, and I think those are probably going to be critical for these two episodes today. You want to dive into some, before we dive into some synopses.
Yeah. That was a really nice thing you just said to me, by the way.
Oh, it's extremely true. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the podcast with you specifically. Before we get into the synopses for people that are playing the home game, we have a little bit of correspondence to catch up with. From our friends over at the Hold No Maneuver podcast, they have sent us some questions, and we are going to do our best to answer these. 4 questions that are, 3 questions and 1 statement.
Okay.
From Hold No Maneuver co-host Michael Sauron. If a woodchuck could chuck wood, wouldn't they? Yes.
I'll say oui.
Excellent. From Hold On Maneuver co-host Mark Vibert, otherwise known as Arizona Mark. Statement. More Ahsoka series connections to this arc discussed. In regards to Storm over Ryloth and Innocents of Ryloth. Aspen, as the resident Ahsoka fan, both the character and the TV show, what are your notes on that one, or will we dig into it later in the analysis?
It's less Ahsoka. It's not Ahsoka. It's Rebels. But I mean, it's like Ahsoka in that it's Hera Syndulla. But Hera is. I mean, I don't want to spoil anything. I mean, I think you know because you've seen Rebels.
I've seen Rebels.
So you know that Hera. We'll get into this in the 3rd episode of the arc. We're in the 2nd episode of this Ryloth arc. That her father is he's not a commander, but like he's like the leader of the Twi'leks.
We're gonna meet Mr. Syndulla.
Yeah. So
next episode.
Yeah. So that is the connection there. So at this point she would have been a child.
Well, I have watched all of Rebels. A lot that was a while ago.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has left my mind except for, bits that were covered in the Ahsoka TV show.
Yeah.
And the fact that Darth Maul fights Obi-Wan Kenobi in one episode.
That's such a good episode.
Yeah,
God,
and also the fact that Darth Maul talks in Rebels, and it's so boring.
It's
honk shoe.
Not, but
we're not here to discuss that. We're here to talk about this correspondence.
Because yes, she is effectively royalty. There's some pretty wild episodes that happen in Rebels around this. We're coming back to it with her father. And in this, where you can kind of see, this is the beginning, you kind of see his perspective on it in that the next episode. Of course, we didn't meet him in this episode. We're just now freeing the Twi'leks. And they're about to go and they need to retake the capital city, and that's where he'll be. So
we reach Aspen. From co-host of the Hold On Maneuver, Michael Sauron. Why is the Outer Rim such a hotbed of destruction?
I mean, I think we could we could, I mean, destruction. I think, I think Outer Rim planets tend to be, whether in whatever, in literally any type of science fiction, like whether it's Firefly or Star Trek or Star Wars, I think the implication is that they're a little more Wild West, and because they're Outer Rim, it's as if, I mean, they're literally outer if the central part of the government is farther away from them, they're harder to govern. So, like in Star Wars, whether it's the Republic or whether it's the Empire in charge, that's where you get crime syndicates. That's where you get the Hutts. It's where you get a lot more spice running, things like that. Because I think, yeah, the implication is they're farther away. They're more spread out. It's a little bit more lawless in that way.
I wish I knew more about history, because that sounds that's an outstanding explanation. And now I want to go into actual history and see how that has played out.
I mean,
more than likely through colonization efforts from, everyone.
Yeah, because there's two things there, which is the idea of like literal distance. Because if let's use a kind of example of like you have a colony and you are an imperial power, you put your people in charge in those spaces. Because if you're England and you have India as a colony, right, then you put your English generals and commanders, and they become like mayoral. I don't know that history super well, but they would be in charge in those spaces, because you have to have some type of exertion of power. You can't just be like, sure, they're over there, right? So if you don't, but then presumably, like there must just, there's a distance thing. There is to maybe there's like cultural differences, like that's talking about colonization. When you're talking about like the Republic, which we could argue maybe has its own type of like colonization aspects to it, though I think is kind of more on the idea of like, we are trying to seek republic democracy. This is truly, you can represent yourself. We're not deciding who you are ostensibly. I think it just maybe has more to do with like, you're farther away. And I think in that way, the other side of that maybe is like the sort of concept of the United States Wild West, which is our favorite word, aesthetic, is its own kind of interesting aesthetic of like, we are, I guess that actually has to do with distance too. It's right, you're at the other side, the western part of the country, and the seat of power is like the east side of the country. So you can't even get us, right? Over here we got rough and tumble boys and girls. So anyway.
What an outstanding explanation. Also from Michael Sauron. If Kirk helped on Ryloth, how many Twi'leks would he seduce? Answered. Either all of them or the ones that were most like robots.
Oh no. I think one. I think if he were part of it, there would be one. And they would make eyes.
Kirk is strictly monogamous whenever it comes to having dalliances. It's never like he is cheating on one with another. But he does get around.
Yep.
He had sex this season, which is pretty exciting.
Oh my god. Do you want to talk about our episode?
Indeed. Let's go ahead and get to the synopses for folks that are playing the home game.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and start with The Way to Eden. Director David Alexander. Writer, story by Michael Richards and Arthur Heineman. It was already spoiled that Michael Richards is the pseudonym for Dorothy Fontana. Teleplay by Arthur Heineman. From the Joan Crosby syndicated column TV Scout from February 21st, 1969. Here we go. One of the top picks tonight is Star Trek's Way to Eden. Guest star Skip Homer does a light takeoff on Dr. Timothy Leary, LSD scientist in quotes. He plays Dr. Severin, a robed and bearded leader of a group of sick hippies looking for Eden, and they are literally sick, carrying a disease which threatens the lives of any society they may reach, including the lives of the men of the Enterprise, not the women, after they come aboard and try to persuade the Spacemen to join them. Even Mr. Spock joins one of these spatial hippies tonight for a moment of song as they seek their planetary paradise. Thank you, Joan.
Thanks, Joan. Did Joan write sick and sick, or did you just add that?
She wrote 6 and sick hippies.
Incredible.
That was not editorializing.
That's beautiful. I like that.
Well,
I like thanks. I like Joan. So my side, we got Star Wars, Clone Wars, Innocents of Ryloth, released March 6th, 2009. The writer on this one is, director is Justin Ridge, writer is Henry Gilroy. Which our friend, we should be doing an impression of him as well. And here's the description. During the battle for Ryloth, this is by TV Archaeologist. I feel like when TV Archaeologist comes in and does a description, IMDb is pretty good. Sometimes they leave things out, and I'm like, who are you, mystery person? During the battle for Ryloth, Obi-Wan, Commander Cody, and his 212th Attack Battalion set out to free the occupied Twilight village of Nabat. 2 troopers, Waxer and Boyle, find a young girl named Numa who becomes instrumental in Obi-Wan's plan. She really does. She really does. Penny? Can I just tell you, I might have cried multiple times watching both of these episodes.
Outstanding.
I don't know why I'm feeling weird today, but I'm crying thinking about Numa.
Innocents of Ryloth, I can understand. There's a small child in a war-torn area that is teaching soldiers the value of kindness and how not to be racist.
She picks up her little, when he gives her a little stuffed doll, and she, they like animated her super well. She even like walks like a tiny little girl. Like she kind of holds her bag really, really tight and almost like arcs backward, and it made me really emotional. Yes. So you understand why I might cry about her taking them to her
crying during
bombed out home.
Crying during the way to Eden.
At the very end.
Regardless, there is a large swath of Star Trek fans that would be like,
I know. Huh? I know. I saw what everybody said about this episode, and I'm like, space hippies, ridiculous. And people being like, oh, just wait till you get to that shitty space hippies episode. And I'm like, totally, for sure. And then I was watching it, and I was like, uh-oh. Do I like this? I think I really like this.
I think the journey was extremely well illustrated in These Are the Voyages, season 3 by Mark Cushman and Susan Osborne, where the author talks about their personal experience of watching this episode for the first time when they were 14 years old and being like, what is this? This is they're singing and dancing. This is the worst episode of Star Trek ever. And they held that they held that cringe muscle in themselves, and every time that they watched The Way to Eden, the cringe was still induced, but as they got older, it got lessened and lessened and lessened to the point where they were like, actually, this episode genuinely has some interesting things to say.
Thank God. I was like, it's, yeah, okay. I'm glad that Cushman and Susan Osborne are with me.
There are undoubtedly so much worse episodes. So much worse episodes this season. This episode seems to have some interesting things to say. They might be a little bit malintentioned.
Yes, that's for sure.
But they still have a point of view. They are interrogating that point of view too.
Right.
They're interrogating the limits of empathy. They're interrogating their own empathy. They're interrogating the premise of Star Trek a little bit.
Yes.
And on top of that, I friggin' enjoy the camp, man.
I guess I have no cringe bone. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't particularly find it to be fun to look at something and be like, cringe. I'm like, whatever. It's just fucking whatever it is, you know?
Yeah.
Unless it is truly so off base. I imagine if you're young, if you are a young person in the 60s watching this, you're like, oh, yeah, it's probably going to hit that really hard because it's such a strange depiction of 60s, 70s hippies.
Yeah.
it does have, because there's me watching it now and there's the me watching it now crying. I'll tell you what made me cry, by the way, was spoiler to the end of the episode when they do get to their Eden, which is a beautiful planet, but there's nothing else on it, and then it turns out everything is poisoned.
It's not just poison, Aspen. It's boiling acid.
It's literally full of acid.
It's regular acid.
It's just regular, but it's horrifying.
Yeah.
And one of the characters, Adam, they find him dead after he ate fruit, and there's something about Spock so seriously looking at Eden, being like, "Oh, his name was Adam," which would seem like it's awkward. It's kind of like a glib thing to say, but it truly wasn't, because what it was hitting me at was this feeling of there's so much inside of this, of like the desire for something that doesn't exist, you know, because the whole concept of a Garden of Eden is not being a place you get to belong in or be in.
I will say, no, finish your thought.
That is because then by the end of the episode, Spock does say to the others, he's like, "I truly hope you find this thing that you are looking for." And like, whether or not I agree with that journey, there is something like so desperate, so deeply sad about it. And his like belief in them for wanting it was like very emotional for me.
Yeah.
Though actually the Spock characterization throughout the entire episode was so emotional for me.
Spock's dynamite in this episode.
I found his like interest in them to be so compassionate.
The rest of the crew is pretty much fuddy-duddies.
Except
Spock
for
is
Chekhov.
like,
Chekhov is
Chekhov's a real fuddy-duddy.
He's a real fuddy-duddy. But he also is clearly like in love with one of them, with a background that is not just immediate love. It's like, or he feels guilty, and he's being fuddy-duddy in the sense that he's like, well, I have a duty, and sorry, but you're right. Fuck, I didn't mean to interrupt your thought.
No, because I would not begrudge anyone thinking that notion is hokey, of Adam eating fruit and dying.
Yeah.
Spock literally hitting the nail on the head by going, his name was Adam. I really like this episode. I really like this episode.
Okay, I don't feel crazy.
You're not crazy. It's an episode that has a lot to say. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Kirk being fuddy-duddy within. I mean, Kirk vacillates from easygoing liberal military guy to, as we saw in the first season, a strict by the book disciplinarian.
He's really annoyed by them.
He's really annoyed by them. Everyone's annoyed by them.
I mean, they're really annoying.
But there's also an exercise in empathy, and then that is interesting, where everyone is attempting to try and see their point of view. They've got the great Dr. Severin. I almost said Doc Severinson.
What's up with that dude's ears?
They're big.
Am I right?
They're big.
Am I right? Look at that dude's ears. I was like, is he human? He just has weird fucking ears.
Yeah. What race is he? Is it established of what race he is?
I don't know, man. He might just be a dude with big fucking ears.
Sure.
They look like Creature from the Black Lagoon gills, but has ears.
Well, yeah.
It was just like on his ears. Like if you were a boxer with like massive cauliflower ears. What a man. What a shitty man. Question for you.
Please. I love answering questions.
What did the space hippies want?
This sounds like the setup to a joke. I think they wanted the same thing that Dr. Severin wanted, which was to be left alone on, well, a version of what Dr. Severin wanted, which is they wanted to be left alone on a paradise planet to live organically and live and have some good commune living.
Okay. Yeah, because I think organically is the piece there. It's like they're effectively Luddite-esque.
Mm-hmm.
They're Luddites, though they are Luddites, obviously, on stealing spaceships
Yeah.
and, having those tools. This is where, so 100%. And that, of course, in the 60s and 70s has its equivalency of like, yeah, like earth children and wanting to live off the land. I do think it's interesting as a piece of texture that
Mm-hmm.
they're rich kids. One of them is
Hell
this.
yes, Aspen.
One of them is the son of an ambassador or something. And so they can't touch them. They can't throw them in the brig, even though they've literally stolen a ship
Yeah.
and then drove it to the point that it exploded. They stole and destroyed property.
Yeah.
And then they're brought onto the ship where they then cause havoc, but they can't do anything about it because they're rich, powerful kids. So I just think that that's an interesting sort of piece to it. It makes them look real bad. One of them is former Starfleet. At least one of them is former Starfleet and dropped out.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Severin is a renowned scientist who has renounced his ways of sciencing like 95%. Yeah. And then there's Adam, who looks like he just likes to party. And there's two other people that are women that don't, one sings and the other one is just there.
Yep. 100%. And then there's Leela? What's her name? Leela? What's her name? I don't know. Alina. She's
I wrote it down.
Yes.
Irina Golulian. Irina Golulian.
Yes.
Golulian.
So there is, it's just very like here's the thing. Okay, because there's then and then there's like how we can find their counterparts now, right? Because I do think that there are similar counterparts of what you can see in 2024. Yeah.
Yeah. No, please continue.
I have a lot of compassion for this, right? Like I feel very strongly about not discounting young people's like I'm taking the doctor out of this, right? I'm just taking these young people who are kind of following this populist dude. It's a bit cult-esque, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who have like who clearly see maybe this is what you were talking about, which is like we're rebelling against the idea of this utopia, that like this is not actually a true utopia in their eyes. There's a mechanization element, I am assuming. There's dominance of computers and technology that makes them feel like they're disconnected from a real Earth. So I'm going to have compassion for that for sure, because this starts to bring in me current stuff, which is I'm by no means a Luddite or want to be. But, we've had conversations where I start, like, I think a lot of what in an ideal world, technology is achieving the Star Trek ideal of technological advancement gets to result in utopia and in making your life easier. You could work if you want to or not. You could do art. And instead, if it is privatized, particularly, specifically, if it is privatized, because by the way, I was talking to my friend who works for JPL about the idea of what sorry, this is like a tangent that is related of like what we're talking about with like diverting resources toward things like space travel versus towards say like resources that are needed.
Based on last week's discussion.
Yeah. And she was like, well, here's the thing. Public funded space research creates technologies that help people in other ways. It has resulted in so many more life-saving types of technologies than just this one thing. When you privatize space travel, when you have these pieces that are privatized, it is only benefiting fucking rich people all the time. And I think there's also a good point here, because I just need to amend how I was kind of talking about it last week, which is also to say that it is not funding for space programs that is keeping us from having healthcare. It is, funneling billions into genocides. Anyway, and other things. So I think that there is still conversation to be had around that. I don't think it's like a black or white thing. I'm not just like, it's always good. But I do think just to kind of talk about public funding for things like this. So anyway, in our ideal world, technology is toward actually making our lives better and would be that Star Trek ideal. In the world that we have, it is dominated by shareholder interests and the fact that things like we were just talking about this off mic, our push and investment as someone who works at a tech company, our obsession with AI is being fueled by perception of a tool as opposed to actual usefulness of a tool. It is being pushed literally because that's who the funders and shareholders, that's what they want to push, not because of actual perceived need for a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
They're excited at the prospect of the amount of money that a company can save by letting go of workers and instead being able to automate those things, because that could mean more cash to the stockholders.
I don't even know if it's that much. I think they're just like, AI will make us money. So this is all we care about. AI makes money. AI sells and makes money. We're done.
The older I get, the more that I see that rich people,
they just want to be richer. They don't.
At least the public-facing ones seem to be bereft of a certain type of intelligence.
Yeah, actually, there is no ability to see past short-term gains, because you and I both know that AI is also economically damaging. Mm-hmm. It is not economically, environmentally damaging. So I guess what I'm getting at is unfettered technological advancement when privatized specifically. And I don't think this is I think Star Trek does have it's a public component. Mm-hmm. But I think that like in our 2024 world, I have a lot of compassion for like, what the fuck? Like, I want actual technology to be making my life better, not just making billionaires richer, right?
It is wild how this episode anthropologically is so fascinating from a 1969 point of view. And not only that, but I just looked at the date of the person that wrote the teleplay. They were born in 1910, which would ostensibly make them 59 years old whenever they wrote this, or 58 or 59. One of those things. So you got a person of an older generation that's looking on the generation and being like, these weird kids, get off my lawn, while also challenging their own notions of empathy. But ultimately coming down on the side that the space hippies are weird and creepy, and they're able to weaponize our own inherent empathy as law-abiding, rule-following citizens.
Don't like that.
To break the law and land on acid planets. And who wants that? And ultimately, whatever they're chasing is impossible. I think that's where the episode is landing in terms of passing it while also exercising empathy. And then you watch it through 2024 lens as well. And your freaking Dr. Severin is an anti-vax typhoid Mary.
He's that anti-vax typhoid Mary
I dare
who
say,
wants to force women to be trad wives. Yeah.
And in certain ways, that aspect plays a whole lot better now than it must have been in 1969, where you just kind of say that he's a typhoid Mary. Now,
COVID and shit. Like,
we've had the extermination of how many millions of people because someone said that they were trapped.
Right. Oh, yeah. It's actually, to me, I actually watch it and I see him as I see him and the hippies as two totally different actors. Adam is kind of following him. I see them as people who
also how many people were co-opted by rhetoric that sounded reasonable.
Right.
By a passionate and charismatic leader.
Exactly. That's very populist. It's very like, it feels very dangerous because people do like, that's the thing that I think I'm like, and then
like the mic drop, because Spock has so much empathy for these people.
Yeah.
And then after talking with Dr. Severin, who is like, I'm trapped here. I need to go commune with nature. And Spock going, you realize the place that we are going. If you commune with the natives there, you could kill them.
Yep.
And Dr. Severin is like, if that is what it takes, I must be there. We have to reach a greater goal. All of these things to be able to create life. To which the hard cut of Spock going, Dr. Severin is insane.
And he's fucking right. I hate that man with every bit of my soul. Like that is like, that's the thing, is that like, he's the villain.
Oh, I wrote down that he is speaking of last week, he's the Shailene Woodley of the galaxy.
Yeah, like he is
someone that is so crunchy.
He is Robert F. Kennedy. He is like, I would like to put people in charge that are going to take all the fluoride out of the water. And like, he's like, we're going to do all these things. And like, you're going to fucking kill the world because of your insane ideas that are purely selfish. Purely selfish. They have nothing to do with anybody else's well-being.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that man. I hate our Robert F. Kennedy with all my soul.
And there's a huge swath of the population who is like, good, I want someone selfish, which is bananas.
So I think that is why this episode is interesting. Because yeah, it does feel like it's both. It feels like you're right, we're coming out on the side of like, these are dumb kids. Dumb rich kids who had to see what happened, like had to like find, like fuck around and find out, right? And I don't want it to be that way though. Like,
no,
I don't want that. I want, like, I think ultimately there is something to be said about pushing back on a structure. Yeah.
You say that you don't want it to be that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time to dig into the research.
Accessing library computer data.
So, Aspen.
Yeah.
Notoriously.
Yeah.
This is the final episode of Star Trek, the original series, that Dorothy Fontana works on.
Yes.
Kramer. The Kramer. The original episode, they land on the planet. They discover that the former inhabitants of this world were indeed a beautiful, peace-loving people. However, in time, they allowed their primitive emotions to take over, leading to a planet-wide war of extermination. That sounds different.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah.
This episode was originally a Dr. McCoy episode.
Okay.
And it is one of the great unmade episodes of Star Trek.
Oh.
And that ending was a reflection of Dr. McCoy and his estranged daughter, Joanna.
So it sounds very different than what DC originally wrote.
Extremely different. And so
okay.
This was talking about a generational clash between her absentee father and his estranged daughter.
Okay.
And that was after a notes pass. Aspen,
Kenny.
Here is the original idea for Joanna by Dorothy Fontana, the great Dorothy Fontana. Dorothy Fontana came up and reading from These Are the Voyages, Season 3 by Mark Cushman and Susan Osborne. Dorothy Fontana came up with the premise for Joanna in 1967 after talking with DeForest Kelley. She had suggested it might be interesting to do a story in which we discover McCoy has a son from the failed marriage he never talks about. Kelley suggested it not be a son, but a daughter. Here's the original premise. The USS Enterprise stops at a starbase to pick up new medical personnel being transferred to duty aboard. As the group of doctors and nurses beam aboard, McCoy and Kirk greet them in the transporter room. One of the women, a lovely dark-haired girl of 20, takes one look at McCoy and flings herself into his arms, much to Captain Kirk's surprise. Then McCoy turns to Kirk, grimaces, and introduces Nurse Joanna McCoy, his daughter. The heart of this story concerns Captain Kirk, McCoy, and Joanna. We learned that McCoy had been married a long time ago, but it turned sour and ended in divorce. McCoy soon after joined the space service. In the course of the story, Kirk will find himself drawn to Joanna, and she is naturally attracted to him. This situation will turn our usually competent and amiable doctor into a fiercely protective father, a situation meant to create a note of humor as well as conflict. After never seeing much of her father, Joanna might begin to resent McCoy's sudden fatherliness, especially if it threatens a deepening relationship with Kirk.
So that's the original episode concept.
Yes.
This episode is so far from that concept. The only thing remaining is generational differences.
Gene Roddenberry was like, there's not enough drama in here. Meanwhile, I'm reading that and I'm like, this is purely a character piece that takes place on the Starship Enterprise.
Right.
That gives us depth into McCoy, challenges his relationship with Kirk, challenges the notion of Kirk bedding a woman at every port. what does that mean to McCoy in an interesting wrinkle, while also kind of being a little bit of a romp, it sounds like.
I will say the only piece I'm actually feeling a little bit like squicky about is 20-year-old daughter and Kirk.
And I think that's the point.
Well, I wouldn't have trusted anyone to make that okay.
Yeah.
Like maybe if it were in the actual form as she intended it to be and all the commentary were actually there. Because otherwise you just get the feeling of like, what is it, Miri, where it's just like, I'm talking to a 13-year-old and being like, well, you're a woman now. And I'm like, she's fucking 13. Stop being weird.
Yeah. In a subsequent draft, whenever Gene Roddenberry ordered this to draft proper, or no, this is another story outline. That is whenever I think the space hippie element was turned up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And it was less of a romp and more just a straight drama.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the stuff with the relationship with Kirk was dropped. And instead it was just a direct generational thing between McCoy and Joanna. And then the folks at the network were like, we don't want McCoy to have a daughter because that he seems old.
He is old.
They weren't even talking necessarily about that he literally had a 20-year-old daughter.
Mm-hmm.
More just the emotional timber. He's being a father to a 20-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, according to Dorothy Fontana, our showrunner, Fred Freiberger, apparently never read the Star Trek manual, the Star Trek Bible, Writer's Bible, because he just assumed that McCoy, Kirk, and Spock were all the same age. And so was like, no, let's just make it Chekhov. And apparently, I actually really like Chekhov getting used because
I know
using the ancillary cast.
I know. Even Sulu gets a brief moment.
Yeah.
I think Uhura I saw, Nichelle Nichols wasn't in this episode because she was doing a singing engagement. So
I would not be surprised.
Get it, girl.
So they used the same communication officer from the Doomsday Machine.
Yep. I did like, that's so interesting. I did like Chekhov getting, it was more than just a like, oh, Chekhov with pretty girl thing. It was like challenging his expectations and his duty, because it was more than, it was like someone he missed, someone that he like felt guilty for leaving and then she was gone, when it was like he felt like he did something wrong, which I think is interesting and emotionally compelling.
Yeah.
And then to sort of be used by her feels so like such a betrayal.
Yeah.
Like it truly does, because I actually think that like he's playing it so committed and so authentically. Like, sweet baby boy. It just like he looks so sad. So I
do wish that we had gotten the version of this episode which we would have seen the lovable Dr. McCoy be an outright bad father.
Right.
That would have been so interesting. In a subsequent draft, he calls his ex-wife a witch and then compares his daughter to his ex-wife, saying she's a witch. She'll do nothing but take from you. And I'm like, whoa.
Jesus Christ. Oh, it would have fucked with me a little bit. I don't know. I would have been like, yikes, Aroni.
Right. And I think that's kind of the point.
Well, but to me, I'll tell you.
Better to write that kind of an episode, but Dorothy Fontana.
Well, I'll tell you that sounds like a different episode than this one.
It does.
I wish it were a different episode. I wish that episode had been made and it would have been a pure character study episode, because we used to get those and it would have been good. Yeah. It's so funny that for you to say that. I genuinely thought that like more of the DNA of her original story would be in this, and I swear that is nothing like what this episode is.
Not
in
at all.
any way.
And she was very disappointed in the episode that resulted, and quite rightly so.
Yeah.
Because it's nothing like the thing that she wanted to write, and it sincerely just got noted into a completely different episode, to the point where Dorothy Fontana walked away from her contract, and because of it, according to These Are the Voyages, gave up $10,000.
Wow.
That's a lot of money to me right now. $10,000 in 1960s money? Good Lord. But she was like, that I don't ever want to do a bad story. She thought that it was a bad story, and so she walked.
I thought I thought that there was another episode that I thought that she walked. I was surprised to see her name because I thought she had already quit.
She had quit from season 3.
Mm-hmm.
I guess she had a longer contract and instead violated the terms of those contracts, that contract, and walked away from $10,000.
I mean, good for her.
But fear not, Aspen. This is not the last that we will hear from Dorothy Fontana.
Doesn't she come back in the animated ones?
Mm-hmm. And not just animated.
Yeah. TNG?
Not just TNG. We'll get to it in a couple of years.
In a couple of years, Jesus Christ. Well, okay. So coming back to this episode.
A good episode.
I do think it's a good episode.
Campy? Sure. Yeah. If you don't like it based on because you can't get with the singing, I'm not going to fault you.
Yeah, you're not going to like it then. Yeah. There was a moment where I forgave all the singing because they break him out of his space. They break the doctor out of the little cell he was in. And because Irina has tricked Chekhov effectively.
Irina Goyoyan.
Gogalagoga.
Goyoyan. I think I got it.
She's tricked him like basically into revealing to her how the auxiliary power control system works. And so they've taken over the ship, and baddie doctor turns it to where like there's like a high frequency sound that will knock them out. And they are under like one of them, Marina's understandably like, but that could really seriously kill them. That could hurt them. And they're just like, well, we gotta go.
And Adam's like, we reach, brother.
We reach. And there's this piece where there's just a scene of people slumped over on the bridge and people just knocked out, and he's just singing, and it's just his voice and just this like stillness of people that could possibly be dead. And I feel like, I just thought it was this wild sort of setting these different objectives against each other of like this. There is like a selfishness to there's such a distinct selfishness to a thing that they are doing. Mm-hmm. And yet they think that that it is for a greater good, and instead
the greater good.
And so, but they are doing it at the expense of other human lives. And so it had this really wild atmosphere to me. That was, I thought, a really beautiful shot, which is not often a thing I think of when I'm watching Star Trek. I'm not thinking about often the photography of the thing, but it was just like, it was very chilling. Because again, ultimately, while I feel a bunch of compassion for them the same way Spock does, where it's like, I think that you are misguided, but ultimately you are actually heading toward the right. Like, I think I understand what you're trying to get to. Right now, it is the wrong way to get there.
Speaking of chilling, how chilling was it at the end of Innocents of Ryloth whenever Boyle and Waxer went, "Don't be afraid, we'll be back."
It's a good segue. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did realize we were talking about this, like, but as I was watching this episode, I was like, the Star Trek episode, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna need to talk about so much with this.
It is it's just steal a phrase from Star Wars prequel producer Rick McCallum. It's so dense. Every single image has so much going on. And there's a lot to talk about with Way to Eden, both in terms of what it's saying about 1969, how it plays now, what it means politically, freaking that context of it being generated by a 58, 59-year-old, or the final teleplay being generated by a 58, 59-year-old writer, along with like old white dudes who are definitely the establishment and not part of the youth culture. That perspective is interesting. How they are extending that empathy, how it is testing our natures of what the concepts of Star Trek are, how the characters that we love seem so out of touch being Herberts themselves, except for Spock. It is a very, to coin a phrase, fascinating episode.
And can I just say, last thing about it, that is what's that is what frustrates me, is I think that perception, I get the extension of compassion, but the perception of a youth movement of the 60s and the 70s, which wasn't foolish, like which was trying to achieve justice and equality, which was subsequently sacrificed for class status. I do think like to look at that with such like with kind of like, well, you're just children who will figure out the truth later, stinks to me of like, well, when you're older, you'll be a conservative, like what my dad used to say, the same man who was part of those movements, right? But then he never was, but other people his age were,
Yeah.
And so I feel angry about it. But then also I think that's why I like the complexity of it. There's a different kind of there's so many conversations to come from it.
This is an interesting episode in terms of in terms of the the establishment, how it is reacting to innocence. Where in way to Eden we have a more possibly coded within the episode as naive innocence. That is ideologically driven. Here we are dealing with ostensibly the embodiment of innocence in this little child, and how this current establishment is dealing with it. And then not only that, but its prequel status, playing with those notions, dimensionalizing it, even more, dimensionalizing our clones even more, because I think also up to this point, sure, we've had a rebellious clone, which that rebelliousness was embodied in an ideological difference. Here we got straight up racist clone.
Yeah,
who is like, I do not want to be here. And then is able to learn his lesson that racism is bad over the course of the episode.
He just had to meet someone. He had to meet someone from a different culture.
I didn't know that there could be other people that are good in another culture.
I didn't think I could find a sweet little girl.
To be fair, he's like 3 years old though.
Yeah, we were watching, and Joel, my partner, was like, they're the same age. You're too late. It's a beautiful episode. It is artistically gorgeous. It is interesting in that it's got a lot of really powerful action that balances so well with these quieter moments of characters getting to interact with one another and discover and explore and extend compassion, be better. So it humanizes clones, which we love, and gives
face. It humanizes them not just in a good way, but like,
right. Well, that's what it is to be a human, right? Is to be many things, not just good all the time, not just like fighting for this thing. Yeah, he's clearly I don't remember which one it is, but if it's Boyles or whatever, if it is, he's got his own opinions on things. It had a very strong sort of like racist US troops in Middle Eastern countries kind of vibe, being like, well, we're just doing it for the country, man. And then being like, oh, wait, they're human beings.
One, Boyle is the racist one.
Boyle. Yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah.
Two, it was
he's got a beard.
He's got a porn stash. He straight up got a porn stash.
He's got a beard. Yeah, like a beard. Oh, I guess it's like it comes down.
He's got the facial hair that all racists have. The handlebar.
The handlebar.
And so Boyle is that. And then two, listening to the A More Civilized Age podcast for wonderful research and context giving. It was one of the hosts that point out that tailhead is only a couple letters away from an actual slur that was being used frequently.
Yes.
Not just at the time, but I'm sure that's being used even now.
Right.
As I'm sure all of our right-wing family members are still rallying against all of those Muslims.
Yep. You're absolutely right. Like there's a very clear parallel of which brings up again, but Kenny, it brings it up again of the like idea of This is a very patriotic, nationalistic kind of episode. Like there are like, I am not saying that the Republic is not fucking saving lives. Like very clearly, Twi'leks are being kept hostage, and this is horrifying. They're being used as human shields, and also,
except like that nationalism, I don't think is. Oh boy, this is going to make me seem like a dumb. I don't think that nationalism is obvious enough.
Sure. I don't think so.
I think you have watched the entirety of Clone Wars, and I have also heard extra textually that Dave Filoni, all of these episodes are presented through the lens of propaganda for the Republic. Great. You heard this, yes?
Yeah, sorry. I was just thinking about how halfway through when the bugs showed up, the bug kind of creatures, I went, oh, it's Starship Troopers. And now I'm thinking about how
Starship Troopers, which in
propaganda type, like it's supposed to be like a propaganda type film.
Yes, and also a movie that was watched with dead seriousness in my household.
Yes, I know. That's the point of the film. Is that it could then be watched by people who would then be like, ah, yes, right.
Right, but then what is what is the function of a piece of art where certain people get suckered in to propagate that thing, which just causes other folks that are in the know to then be able to just point and laugh at how much of rubes those people are.
I mean, we've talked about I think we did a Patreon episode where we talked about Starship Troopers because I really wanted to talk about it with you. I'm trying to remember what we talked about. That like the reason I watched it was because it had started coming up on Twitter a lot recently at the time, and I was like, I've never seen this film
because there was a video game that had something to do with it,
right? And that's why it started coming up, and I was like, I've never seen this film, so people started posting about the posts where they're like, it would be like, I think people don't understand Starship Troopers because the people posting are like taking it for face value. I don't think we know how people are going to take our art. We can have an intention for our art, but we don't know how it is going to be perceived. I don't know if the creator of Starship Troopers was like, I want to fool the dummies, or if it was like, I want to.
No,
maybe
he did.
He did? Well, then there you go. But I mean, like, so I think it is a valid question to be like, so if it is just fueling, it becomes a source of propaganda for people who would take it the wrong way. Is that ultimately damaging? Because all it does is it gives us the good, smart people being like, well, they're dum-dums. So it's valid.
For people that are only listening to the audio only feed right now, I'm pointing my finger at Aspen because this gets back to our question that our good listener, Austin Aaron, talked about last week, which we talked about at length, which is context. What is the value of context with a piece of art? And for something like Starship Troopers, it is possible that there is a large piece of the audience who needs that context of this is satire, possibly because so much of American cinema, am I the problem? American cinema has adopted these aesthetics of fascism in order to indicate power. So maybe it is the ultimate piece of satire because it can be read as a traditional action movie. Oh no, did I argue myself out of my own point? Is the whole system corrupted? Am I evil?
It's you.
Oh no.
No, I mean, I don't think so. I think you're bringing up a really valid kind of like to what end.
Well, not just me, Austin Aaron.
Oh, well, I don't think, yeah. I mean, I don't, I think it's one of those where it's like, we can't say what someone is going to do with what we put out there into the world. Like, I think which is different for like media and art, different than art that I would say for like journalism, by the way. I think, art, I think here's the thing. I think someone who wants Starship Troopers to be straightforward and not satire, even when given the context of it being satire, would still be like, it's not, and I believe in everything that just was said and done. You know what I mean?
You know what? This is reminding me of dumb fan theories that Star Wars fans will do, where they'll be like, Vader's not actually dead. Palpatine's not actually dead. Han Solo survived in those eye-catching thumbnails, which present a deliberate misreading of what the film is telling you in order to look for the answers that you want. But in that process is limiting your own way to process art because you want a certain thing to be true.
Right. Right. I mean, and sorry, as you were saying that, and as we were talking about it, I was like, oh, what is the responsibility media might have? Or,
Depends on the size of the audience that you
sure.
are aiming for, right?
Right. Because we do have, I do think that production companies with this much power do have a responsibility to actually tell like stories about people of color and to not kill the Black person first anymore. And like, like I do think they do have responsibilities. But like, does a film, but beyond that, like, are certain pieces, like, what are the responsibilities? Because we know how people are if they, like, if someone there's like studies about if people are told a lie or something, and it takes, like, it's like almost impossible, even if you tell them the truth and the truth and truth afterward, they're like not going to change their mind. Kind of.
Yeah.
So if something is pushed at them, the Fox
Just
News
like
issue.
people cannot change my mind that The Matrix Resurrections is not a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
It is a
just like that.
cold masterpiece.
Just like that. So I don't mean to like be like, Innocents of Ryloth, am I right? Because like, and that's true, like, it's true, nationalism. Like, here's the other thing. They're fucking saving their actual lives. Like, they're literally being starved to death, and they are bombed, and their entire world is being destroyed by the separatists. They are literally saving them, and they're launching a military campaign on Ryloth to do so. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to get into the next episode where I think it's going to actually dive into the complexity of it a little bit more, of like what then is the like how we want to approach this. And I do think that that's worth keeping in mind.
Which is also the argument, possibly, again, going back to another thing that Austin Aaron asked us about covering these things not as individual episodes, but as arcs.
Sure. And
the arc is one thing, but these things are presented completely as their own story, each individual piece. And you can put them together and it is a richer experience. And also, this piece alone is nationalistic. It is simplistic about racism. How you can get over racism whenever, and I'm totally stealing this thought from a more civilized age. But your racism can be solved whenever you just meet one good one.
Right. And she's tiny and literally innocent.
Yes, she is perfect. She is the embodiment
of perfection.
As opposed to, again, a more civilized age, where they're talking about literal poster children and how these notions of racists getting to have their journey affected by folks of color, and when it is completely offensive, like in Green Book or Crash, and the problematic aspects in retrospect of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, where these characters of color they are absolute scions of what they are. That's right. They are embodiments of cars, great cars, wonderful cars that love to be driven.
Reminds me a bit of, Rosa Parks being sort of established as the face of the movement when it was actually a different, like a Black girl that kind of wouldn't have been seen as like as attractive to a movement. Obviously, we do whatever we need to do, kind of thing. But I was just like, it's the good ones, right? Because if it were an angry young man or something or whatever it would be in this case in this episode, or someone who like was frustrated with them being there, not doing more or something, right? Like, but in this case, she is just like it's like that, like she is a good one, and so she gets to aid them on their journey. She is real cute though.
Yeah, she's a cute pie. She has that little toy. She keeps going, nearer.
I mean, I think also in like a 2024 sense, and this was true in 2009 as well, with fucking wars that never end. There is something extremely horrifying about watching a child enter her home that has been literally bombed and destroyed, and she has not eaten in days. And you don't know if her parents are alive or dead. And she is helping you. This tiny child should not be helping soldiers, should not be running out to help Obi-Wan stand up. Like, I shouldn't have to watch a tiny child be a hero. A tiny child should just get to be a fucking kid.
And then to go back to my segue about the beginning of this.
Yeah.
Where the soldiers say, "Don't be afraid, we'll be back." And that's another one of those lines that works because of the prequel nature, and it suddenly sounds pretty innocuous in the moment.
Oh my God. I didn't even realize that's what you're getting at. Right. Because actually, oh my God, right.
Yeah.
Because, I'll be back, but it'll be back in the form of a different type of military force.
Yeah, it'll be a clone trooper with round eyes this time, not the Boba Fett tea.
Yeah. Well, we'll look similar, but not the same. We won't also be clones. We'll we'll just be shitty kids. but yeah, we'll come back looking similar, and we'll. Oh no, Kenny.
It's pretty good.
Neoliberalism to fascism cycle. Yeah. And that, kind of leads into these. Once again, like, I mean, to view this kind of through the eyes of like Iraq, Afghanistan war, like kind of, and then to kind of see it too, and what I'm clearly relating it to, which is the destruction of Gaza. Kind of like, it's just a deeply horrific thing. Also, it's a beautiful ass episode that's absolutely gorgeous and made me cry. I think it's Obi-Wan gets to do the coolest shit. He does some like there was like at one point he's got all the like the creatures that are coming at them that are been, by the way, starved, so that they want to like eat people, which is,
I believe they're known as Hungry Boys.
Hungry Boys, that's their official name in the art book.
George came to us and said, "I want some Hungry Boys." And so we consulted some Ralph McQuarrie original sketches from Empire. Aspen, do the Killian Plunkett part.
As we were looking at I can't get the accent today. As we were looking at the designs for the Hungry Boys, we looked, actually realized that every single Hungry Boy is actually the same design, just duplicated over and over again, but but really it's all the same Hungry Boy, but it looks like different Hungry Boys. Well, at one point, Obi-Wan pulls like, I kept being like, oh my God, he's being an actual Jedi now. Where he's doing the thing where he like sort of like mind controls all of them.
Oh man, that was pretty cool.
And leads them all into this little kind of tunnel space, and then has the clones shoot down like the bridge. Sorry, Aspen, it was great.
Because we're talking about nationalism in regards to this specific episode of Innocents of Ryloth.
Yeah.
And what best example of talking about the insidious nature of propaganda than whenever you are watching a piece of propaganda that is very well done.
It's like, this is so cool.
Think about
Jedi rule.
Top Gun Maverick, Aspen. Top Gun Maverick, your favorite movie, a total piece of propaganda. I'm pretty sure that I've had discussions with Heidi, my partner, and she's going, I don't think it's propaganda.
What? There, at one point, it zooms in on the joystick and it says Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, but it's that notion where the idea of propaganda that's been pushed on us is friggin' triumph of the will. And it
right.
So we watch Star Wars and we see all of these shots of all of the throngs and throngs of people that are standing at attention for Darth Vader, and our brain goes fascists because we have recognized those images from newsreels and from Triumph of the Will and all of these pieces of propaganda. Meanwhile, freaking look at any MCU movie and anything that involves the military has to have a sign off from the military, and more than likely that depiction of the military it's probably going to be cool.
Right.
Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel, Air Force. Straight up.
A total piece of Air Force propaganda.
Right.
Yeah.
They're all like, it's very much all military propaganda.
Iron Man, a contradiction that extremely wealthy industrialists will be able to save us from the military by privatizing the military.
Jesus Christ.
Totally works because mellow vibes, dude.
Mellow vibes.
Because it's a good movie.
He's got a house in Malibu.
He's a regular dude. He eats Burger King whenever he gets back from being a kidnapped.
McDonald's.
No, it's Burger King.
It is?
Yes.
I thought it was McDonald's.
Look it up, Aspen. Look it up.
I believe you. I don't know. That just goes to show how strongly McDonald's has implanted itself in my brain.
Propaganda.
Yeah. This is why I think I am, while ultimately, I think, the means and perhaps the goals are misguided in, the Star Trek episode, Path to Eden.
Way to Eden.
Way to Eden. I'm like, I just forget. Yes, I did just forget the title of our episode.
To be fair, Aspen, you did forget the title of Revenge of the Sith earlier.
I did.
You said Return of the Sith.
I did.
Which I know that the titles of Return of the Jedi or Revenge of the Sith are supposed to rhyme because...
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
I did.
So ask the Star Wars contingent.
I don't know. You can't expect me to remember so many titles.
I've only got one reaction to that.
I loved that, dude. I was gonna say, while the specific goals of the hippies and the way to Eden and the means of getting to them is kind of like, this are a little frustrating for me. Like to look at talking about, we're talking about a militaristic, like a military industrial complex in which we are like highlighting and uplifting these actions that we don't approve of and do not want to be funding. So I can understand a counterculture movement that does not want to be in support of things that are being funded. You know what I mean? Like, again, the specifics of the way to Eden are simplistic and sees it as naive, but that does not mean that like what they're sort of representing of the time, those counterculture movements were not actually truly like valid. Do you know what I mean? So I don't I don't like undermining it.
Just because you are naive is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be something to be aspired to, something to be valued. I mean, children are naive, and who is held up in higher regards in American society than the children?
I miss the children. I mean, I miss the feeling sometimes of how politically motivated I was in college. Like, I miss it so much.
I'm sorry. What?
Why? What do you mean?
You're so politically motivated now,
I am. Aspen. I know. I'm sorry. I think I just had more hope. I think that's what it was. But I think it was also like the era. It was also like the era of it, because it was literally the whole Obama thing of like fucking that was all hope. So I'm not.
You
surprised.
had a crush on him.
Who didn't? Am I right?
You haven't even said that the robot laugh is the Terminator song.
What?
The robot laugh from the episode is the Terminator cadence.
It is? Is that how he laughs like in Terminator?
He doesn't laugh like that. That's in literally the Terminator theme song.
What? I don't know what you mean.
In the Terminator, when they're like,
oh,
the drums.
No,
the drums.
Sorry, that's Phil Collins in the air tonight. You're welcome.
A long time ago, start date this week. I courted a beau, I dated a geek, but none of them could warp my drive into hyperspace. The best of both worlds kept me in second place. Captain's log on a holocron. I wanted a snog, I penned a song. 17 more minutes of thighs in super high def. USS Enterprise, DTF. Don't you take my Ewok glider and clip it. Don't you take my red shirt buddy and nip it. If you spill the tea, I'm gonna sip it. I starship it.
Hi.
Aspen, what are we doing?
We are naming our favorite ships that go ship, ship, boop, 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 beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, to the sky. And our favorite ships that go to each other in either property.
Excellent. I think we got a plethora of options this week.
Man, we do. We finally do. We get multiple ones in Star Trek, which we don't usually, which is why I think you should let me name mine ship first, which is the Aurora from Star Trek.
Excellent.
I watched it on Paramount, so I didn't watch the original, so I don't know what the original ship looks like. But the ship in the newer version is beautiful. Like the shape of it is very cool. It's kind of Star Wars-esque, like almost like Y-wing-esque. I don't know. I found it to be very compelling, and then it went boom.
Can you do your best to describe the design of the Aurora in TOS remastered?
Oh, yeah. Well, what does it look like in the original? What does it look like in the original, the non-remastered one?
We'll get to it.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fun. Let me just take a look at it just so I can make sure, because I watched it and I was like, right. It was like it looks like that's what it was. It was like a little kind of frog. I like that it looked like a little like a front of a frog, and it was like whoop. And then it had like little I guess this makes sense. It's consistent with design around like keeping your power away from your main component just in case there's things. So it's like there's two little guys and a Y shape down below. But I think what I really liked about it was it looks like a little frog.
I like that even whenever they dare to redesign something, they're like, what would Matt Jeffries do?
Oh. Yeah, I mean, it's still consistent. It makes sense. Matt Jeffries all along. But yeah, it's like when a frog is swimming and then it like throws its little legs out behind it.
Yeah, of course. I watch frogs swim every day.
Yes, that's what the ship looks like. Yeah. I like that.
It's great.
It's fun.
Well,
and then it exploded. Those dum-dums, that's the thing. It was like watching a bunch of rich kids like take a car out for a joyride. Fuck you.
So there's something very valid in that interpretation if the episode had decided to lean into that a little bit more. But it didn't really. And that's fine too. I really like the episode that we got. For me, it was already revealed, but my ship is going to be the Aurora from Star Trek, the original series. But not the remastered version that is on Paramount Plus, but the original version, which, if you check on Memory Alpha, it is the Tholian ship, but in reverse and with nacelles put on the sides. And anytime that I believe that the reason that they changed it for the remastered is everyone just being like, that's just the Tholian ship with nacelles. We can do better. So I understand that. But I wish that it had kind of been preserved, because there is something very appealing to me about like seeing the dollar getting stretched to an unreasonable amount by them literally flipping the ship around and putting nacelles on it. And also literally no one was anticipating this thing being launched more than 60 years later.
Very fair. Like
Not
it's
60 years later? 60?
I don't know. 69. What year is it?
Oh gosh, in 2 years it's going to be 60 years.
Kill me.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just a flipped around Tholian ship with nacelles. I think that's very cool. And also just the novelty that both of us could choose the Aurora.
I think that's fun.
I do think that's fun.
Oh, I think you're fun.
Moving on.
My romantic ship is also it's also from Star Trek, and it is Adam and Spock.
You love to see it. So unexpected.
I loved it. I loved it deeply.
Yay, brother.
Brother, am I right? Yeah, he was
giving the new term, giving a new meaning to the term we reach.
We reach each other. through our dicks.
Aspen, every time
What?
that we make a double entendre, you don't have to finish it by making it explicit.
We're gonna play these instruments together like we would play your dick. Spot, can I blow your flute? Your flute's your dick.
He doesn't even play a flute, Aspen.
If he did, it'd be his dick. The end.
The end.
The end. Yeah. I know that he was like trying to like get in with them and like soften him up, but they had jam sessions together. Spock was showing genuine interest in him. He comes into his office and he's like, wow, rad dude. I don't know. He speaks in 60s, 70s slang of like 60s slang, sort of.
He basically does.
Yeah. He grabs like his the Vulcan like kind of harp, his Vulcan harp, and he wants to hear him play it, and he does play it. And then later they jam together. He jams with that girl who's playing a wheel.
That sounds, man. Yeah, she's playing a wheel.
She's playing a wheel.
It's great.
It was really cool. It was really funny to me. I texted you this. I was like, everybody was being enchanted by them, but they weren't being enchanted. They were just like clearly in need of music. Yeah. They just needed to vibe a little bit.
There is the dude on the bridge who's just like
bongoing his like knees. He's just like, yeah.
I absolutely adore that.
I was just like, it sounds like they all just needed some music in their lives. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's mine. That's my pairing.
Excellent. I'm going to go with Boyle and Waxer.
Cool.
For sure. We all know, Aspen, it gets lonely on the front line.
Right.
And
we
Boyle,
are just skipping over the fact that it's technically incest, but like, who cares? What does that even mean when there's like millions of you?
Is it incest if it's all from the same DNA? Like
fucking weird. Did you know that's what identical twins are? Because identical twins come from the same egg. So, or the same fertilized egg, right? So that's literally the same exact DNA. So you have your ovum, you have your like two haploid cells. You have the egg, you have the sperm come together and make a full cell. And then with an identical twin, that cell itself is what splits. So identical twins have the exact same DNA, whereas fraternal twins are two fertilized eggs. Anyway.
So
did you know that? Is that fun?
I don't really want to keep doubling down on the question of, is that incest?
I know. I shouldn't have even said it.
Because listeners will start asking me more questions about certain consumption habits that I have. Meanwhile, I'm over here standing being like, Boyle and Wax are so fucking hot, Aspen. Oh, geez.
Listen, forget I said it. This is a dumb little game we're playing. Boyle and Waxer, hot. Go for it.
But you know that it gets lonely on the front line.
Yep.
And Boyle is definitely a racist.
Yep.
For sure. He's definitely being coded as a dude that joined the military because he's excited to fight.
Yep.
But he hates everything. But he was ready to show power.
Yeah, he's just like, I just want to get in there and shoot up some shit.
Even though he seems pretty disillusioned by whatever.
Yeah,
because of the mustache, he's coded as a right-wing twerp.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that when he needs a release, it's a lot. You know,
with his dick.
Again, Aspen, you don't have to finish the double entendre.
Dicks.
So you know that whenever they're having relations out on the field, it is rough.
I think you gotta stop going into such detail with these.
Waxer is very tender.
You gotta stop. It's fine.
I think that they just have an agreement.
Yeah, I think they do too. I think you're right.
And so too do we have an agreement about the concept of this episode and about the concept of this podcast in general.
Yeah.
Art exists in a binary. It is either good or bad. And so too are we going to answer this question of which is good and which is bad, Star Trek or Star Wars, by going through both of these episodes and ranking them on a scale of 0 to 10. Of course, the episodes that we're talking about are The Way to Eden and Innocents of Ryloth. Aspen, you go ahead and go first with The Way to Eden.
So I did like this episode. I thought it was good. I like, you know what, at this point too, any type of episode that makes me want to talk about it a lot, I feel like merits merits like thoughtfulness when it comes to scoring. So I'm gonna give it just a solid old 7.
7. Fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm going to give this one a 7.5.
Okay.
I really jived with this episode. I really enjoyed it. Last week gave Requiem for Methuselah 7. And I thought that this episode was sincerely good. I thought it had a lot to say, even if it was kind of dopey. But it still had a point of view that I was interested in interrogating. And again, it interrogated itself. Yeah, I think it's a smart episode. I think it's insightful. I think it's interesting. At worst, it's very interesting. Yeah, that brings it to a collective total to 7.25, but it's still anyone's game as we go over to Innocents of Ryloth. Aspen, what'd you rank this one?
What did I give Storm over Ryloth?
You gave it an 8.3.
Wow. Goodness gracious. I'm going to give this one an 8.1.
8.1. Why an 8.1?
I don't despite all of the thematic stuff that we brought up, I think that this is, and the faults inherent in it about like certain elements, like what they might say in our current setting, the setting of 2009, despite those things, I think as an episode, we're like in one of the coolest, most fascinating arcs. I think visually that we're just like, it is like hitting a stride that is extraordinary. I think it's got a balance. This episode is a beautiful balance of these like quiet moments, these characterization moments, fabulous action and planning, like the kind of we didn't even get into like the droid commander with the ha ha ha, and just these different like like they're starting to build in these new different big, like kind of like not final bosses, they're like these bosses along the way that are their own characters, have their own strategies. I think they're very compelling and interesting. I think he's very interesting. Yeah, I think the color scheme of it, they talk about in the kind of behind the scenes a bit about how they've desaturated the background. So
that shot of the cruisers coming down from the cloud.
So incredible. Ooh-wee. It was so beautiful. Like it was genuinely so beautiful. And then I just think it's really good storytelling. I just think it's a beautiful episode. I think I feel that, of course, the Ahsoka story to me is like extremely important, kind of a little bit more compelling to me, but still love this episode. So hence 8.1.
Excellent. I'm going to give this episode a 5.
Sure.
For 2 reasons. One, ultimately, I found the episode pretty sleepy.
Okay.
I can't, even though we had an excellent conversation about it, I just found the execution of the episode just a little bit sleepy. And then I was listening to the More Civilized Age podcast about it, and really they were the ones who grabbed my shoulders and were like, there's some problematic racial stuff that's going on, which I'm mad at myself for that completely going over my head. And for that being pointed out to me, I'm going to dock it. I'm going to dock it a point or 2.
You're spite ranking it.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's totally, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Not a severe spite ranking.
Right. But still.
But still, because
no blackface.
Truly. Because it's boneheaded about its execution. Yeah. Which with that.
It is very interesting. I'll just say, I am surprised because, like, when Filoni was talking about it, he was saying that he always wanted to have a story that would be like this with a young child.
Mhm.
And I don't know if maybe the writers or he as kind of supervising director quite realized maybe the perception of the thing. And I think it has to do
I don't think
probably
Fil-
more, probably
I don't
just more
think-
with just being a bunch of white guys who are going more for what we've talked about, like aesthetics. Like they were very interested in the idea of the visual of this little girl she's green, she's a bright color against a desaturated background, almost like the girl in the red coat in Schindler's List. This
Mhm.
like shock of red kind of concept of innocence.
Yeah.
But they've sort of dissociated it from like the true meaning of the thing.
I guarantee you that Filoni was seeing the forest and not necessarily the individual trees,
Sure.
because we know that he's a huge Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
And he's talking with George, and they're talking about the Twilight race already.
Yes.
And so they already have this huge swath to draw from. And so they're probably making this episode,
Mm-hmm.
and they're paying attention to the aesthetics of the darn thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a good, clean story about innocence lost.
Right.
Both
Right.
literally in terms of the innocence lost as well as the loss of innocence.
Right.
Meanwhile, this is our introduction to the personification of a Twi'lek that in a speaking role.
Yeah.
Any
Right.
Twi'leks in speaking roles.
No.
Right?
No. The Jedi. The Jedi. What's her name? The beloved, the one everybody adores. Gosh, why can't I remember her name?
Ayla Secura?
Yes.
She never has a line in any of this. Wait, no. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Yeah, we had episodes with her, right?
Yeah.
We've covered those.
Hmm.
Right. I'm like, that's not just something I watch separately, right?
Well, then maybe that is a deliberate misreading of this episode, considering that we have had other depictions of Twi'leks.
Hmm. Huh.
You know what? I'm going to good faith intention it. I'm going to upgrade it to a 6.
Okay. Look at that. Oh my gosh. Look at what I just did with the power of my words.
Discussion is fun.
Ah.
Especially whenever we are depicting the values that are put forth in both of these episodes, the big commonality and the challenges within the Star Trek episode and the gifts within the Star Wars episode.
Yeah.
Empathy.
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
But unfortunately, the cold, hard fist of facts reigns supreme on this podcast.
All right.
And even with my more charitable ranking of 6, that brings Innocents of Ryloth to a 7.05 versus The Way to Eden's robust 7.25, which means...
Wild.
Aspen, I would like for you to hand the trophy over for this week because Star Trek wins the week.
Did you just do that for Shape of Show?
No.
You're like, Star Wars can't keep winning.
Oh, it can.
No.
I'll keep up for Star Wars, although I couldn't help but think about Shape of Show. But no, 6 is my honest ranking. Boy, oh boy. It's just the first time that Star Trek has won the trophy in a while. It sure feels like it.
Yeah, it's true. That's okay. I will give it to you. But you have to thank God.
I do. I thank God. In His infinite wisdom. And I also thank our patrons at patreon.com/TrekWarsPod, where for $5 a month, you can sign up for early versions of these episodes and extended versions of these episodes. And for $1 measly a month, we will just read your name on air.
Yeah.
Is there a better deal in the Patreon world? I bet not.
I was going to say maybe in like the world, like a McDonald's dollar menu would be really nice.
But the dollar menu is temporary.
Oh, this is
dollar Patreon. Your name's going to be out there as long as this podcast stays alive. A $1 hamburger, that's a 5-minute experience at the most.
At the most, you're probably just stuffing that thing down.
And speaking of things with the most, our patrons have the most. And you could join the fine auspices of fine folks such as Tempo de Sosa, Heidi Rogers, Kevin Miller, Arizona Mark, Austin Aaron, Baobab Cactus, our newest patron, and lastly, but certainly not leastly, Joel T. Partner, who composed our I Starship theme song. Our main and ending theme song was composed by Mr. Tosin Awofeso. Please visit the show notes for more of his musical handiwork. If you want to get in touch with us, please visit our socials on Instagram or Blue Sky. Just search @TrekWarsPod. And if you don't want to do social, please send us an email, trekwarspod@gmail.com. And finally, if you haven't done so, please leave us a review. We survive on word of mouth along with money. So please spread the word, share this podcast, and, just have a good day. You know what I mean?
Like, along with money. Like, money's pretty cool.
Money is pretty good. It helps us keep the lights on. By keeping the lights on, I mean pays for the basic infrastructure. So me and Aspen get to do one of our favorite things, which is gab with each other for 2+ hours.
Yay.
Aspen, I love you dearly.
I love you. Yeah, this is nice. Sorry. Thank you.
Listeners, we love you. Live long and prosper, and may the force be with you.